Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Megan Grebner. With us, as always, to talk all things markets is University of Missouri Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
All right, as we get things started today, let's recap what happened this week in the markets.
Yeah, on the cattle side of the equation this week, cash cattle were 50 cents higher for the week. Those feeder cattle markets were anywhere from steady to $2 lower. On the feature side, the December live cattle futures contract was up $1.70 on the week, while the November feeder cattle futures were down $3.85. On the box beef side, choice box beef prices were down $1.85 this week. That was really on weakness on everything with the exception of ribs. On the hog side of the equation, cash hogs $1.45 higher this week. We got good strength in the lean hog futures contract with December contract up $4.60 on the week. The pork cutout value also gained this week up $2.10.
Scott, as we take a look at this week, really it's been a massive week as we look at hog slaughter numbers.
Yeah, that's right. We got a estimated 2.73 million head of hog slaughter expected to occur this week. That's 127,000 more hogs than where we were a week ago, almost 5% higher. So good news on the hog side of the equation. On the cattle side, 637,000 estimated for this week. That's actually down 28,000 from a week ago, about 4% lower. So a little different news on the cattle side than hogs. But as we think about the hog side, we need to continue to see increases in those weekly slaughter numbers, I think, to deal with the hog numbers we have coming between now and the end of the year.
And we've talked about that a lot recently, specifically as we talk about that. How important is it for us to see weeks like this, week after week, as we move our way through the fourth quarter of this year?
Yeah, so critical. I think, you got to get to that level or maybe even a little bit more just to break even some weeks as we finish here in 2020. So it's good to see this early as well, I think, of a good run this week. That 127,000 head increase just means that's 127,000 fewer we might have to slaughter a week or two down the road. So any way to get ahead right now, which I want to be careful about suggesting we're going to get way ahead here, but those runs are important to help us get through and not have a big backlog to deal with as we get to the end of 2020 as well.
Really a short week for us as we talk about reports, monthly trade data, and as we get into this, some good news, especially on the pork side.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at pork exports for August, came in at 527 million pounds. That's up 18 million pounds from where we were a year ago at this time. On the beef side of the equation as well, so 268 million pounds of beef exported in August. That's 6 million pounds more than where we were a year ago at this time. And frankly, it's the first time since COVID really took effect here in the United States that we've seen beef exports above year ago levels. So pretty good news on that front.
And it looks like October's off to a pretty solid start. Looking at yesterday's export sales report, I'm assuming the first real week after, or first, I guess, couple of weeks after the African swine fever announcement in Germany, marketing year high for sales for pork.
Yeah, that 60,000 metric tons that we got out of the weekly sales data certainly signals some strength here as we finish the year. I keep reminding us that we've got to continue to see a lot of growth to places like China as we get a little further here. 2019 already started to take off, so to see the continued growth that we've been accustomed to for much of 2020, and Megan, just to put a little data to this, if you look year to date, our exports of pork to China totaled 1.03 billion pounds. In the United States as a whole, we've exported right at 850 million pounds year to date. So it tells you China's increase has been partially offset by some other countries who are below year-ago levels. It just highlights how important China is to the story we've been telling in 2020. But if we want that to continue, we need China to grow even more in front of us. This is a never ending. And I sometimes want to remind us that it'll take a very strong last quarter to get Chinese exports to stay as much above year-ago levels as we've seen for the first 3 quarters of the year.
And I would say, though, the global pork situation is could be setting the U.S. up very well to fulfill that. We still have the shift because Germany continues to find wild boars that have died and are testing positive for African swine fever. And then just one report I've seen that they've found African swine fever in a province in China in piglets again. So how much is that concerning as they try to rebuild their herd and pork prices continue to skyrocket there?
Yeah, so it seems like the ASF news is certainly positive for us, both as you talked about in Germany, as well as what we're maybe seeing in China. If that news continues, then perhaps exports out of the United States continue to grow and things look better in 2021. However, I take the other side as well and say, if we figure out that we never see ASF in Germany except in the wild boar numbers, and China doesn't have a big ASF relapse, and they continue on their march of closer to self-sufficiency, that's likely a drag for us in 2021. I think you and I spend a lot of time talking risk management, and I go, we have both ends of the spectrum, laying out there. I hope we get the one that gives us higher prices, all right? But I hope folks also do some risk management to avoid the bad one of no growth, which, by the way, if you look at what USDA is estimating for 2021 U.S. pork exports, it's down 300 million pounds from where it was in 2020. So USDA is already calling for U.S. pork exports in 2021 to be below 2020 levels.
It's a great transition into our supply and demand, which is our final report to talk about this week. Came out earlier today. A couple of things to note, really, on both the beef and the pork side.
Yeah, that's right. So number one, on the beef side, as we start 2020, which we're a fair chunk into, we do have USDA changing relative to the September report by increasing beef production by 90 million pounds. They also increased beef imports by 175 million pounds. That 265 million pound increase in supply, both domestic as well as imports, going to add another roughly 0.6 of a pound in per capita beef consumption for 2020. On the pork side of the equation, I think the story really is much more focused on exports. USDA reduced their pork export number for 2020 by 200 million pounds and their 2021 number by 300 million pounds. That's essentially another 0.3 of a pound of pork in 2020 that will be consumed in the U.S., another pound in 2021. So we're seeing both from some domestic supply changes as well as less exports, and in some cases an increase in imports, more supplies trying to make their way onto U.S. markets. And so we'll have to watch that. Now, I say that, and USDA has basically raised their price estimates for both cattle and hogs. And that may seem like it flies in the face of the S&U numbers, but I think it has a lot to do with what is USDA saying. Demand tends to be stronger than maybe where we were a month ago as we look ahead.
On the same side, or as we talk about the supply and demand numbers, they also made some changes to corn and soybean stocks, which sent prices higher today. Is this something we talk about risk management? Do producers need to think about the potential that input prices could be going up as well?
Yeah, I think when you look, USDA raised their corn price by 10 cents and soybean meal price by $20 a ton. We've seen a pretty good march up in corn futures contracts the last couple of weeks. I would want to pay attention to both sides of that. We'll see what happens now before we finish harvest. I think some would still be out there suggesting lower corn yields ahead. And if so, that tightens up the S&U even a little bit more. It's harder. I wish folks, and you and I've talked about this a lot, when feed costs were at the low levels, I was like, it might not be a bad opportunity to do some risk management. Now that we've moved up, I'd just say if we get a chance where prices have fallen back down a little bit, it might be a good time to lock in some feed costs as we look ahead into 2021.
All right, Scott, that'll do it for us today. As we look ahead to next week, what reports will we be talking about next Friday?
Yeah, focused on the consumer side next Friday with retail prices coming out early in the week, and we finish next week with a consumer sentiment report.
Fabulous. We'll talk to you next Friday. Have a great weekend.
You do the same, Megan.
To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning, visit our website, brownfieldagnews.com. You can submit questions and subscribe there as well. And for all of the great Brownfield podcasts, visit brownfieldagnews.com/podcast. Have a great weekend. I'm Megan Grebner for Brownfield.